Hey again. So in this last video, what I thought I'd do is try to talk about the idea of nuance. What do I mean by that? If you remember, we began the school year looking at things like color symbolism, number symbolism, positioning symbolism, all these kinds of things that in some way affect how we view things, how we take them in. I mean, I even showed you that video one by U2 with the buffalo. And then I showed you version 2 and version 3. And even though each version used the exact same song, which was played in the exact same way, because the images tied to the different videos were different from one another, the overall message seemed somehow changed. In the buffalo video, the message seemed to be about life overall, nature. In the second one, it was more about accepting of others, no matter what branch of life they come from. And in the third one, that was the more typical one where Bono was getting drunk, it looked like, at a bar because there had been a breakup. The point I was trying to make was, it's the same song, but it's interpreted in different ways by different people. That's the exact same thing that's coming up on the AP test. Whether or not you have the exact interpretation that this college professor or this high school teacher has of the piece that you get, doesn't matter so much, as long as you're able to support what you're saying. Support what you're saying. So, in terms of symbolism, if you remember, you said colors tend to have some sort of symbolic content. No, that's the wrong word. Symbolic messaging behind them. But these aren't always agreed upon. I mean, like, why do I always wear black? I never told you. I made a couple of jokes about it. Like, this is the only thing that was left to me when I got divorced. It's slimming. Or maybe it's something more deep, like that Johnny Cash song. I don't know. Some guy started up his what you call it, lawn thing. Sorry. We'll have to live with it. The Johnny Cash song Man in Black, where he basically says that he himself will never wear colors on his back until everyone in the world has justice. So because a couple of you have asked me this, when you get a passage that says, how does the author characterize the people in the passage, right? In the end, that's still all about the same literary devices that we've talked about all year. After all, if a person in a passage is always yelling, or is always making jokes, or is always speaking shyly, the way that they speak, the nuanced manner in which they speak, leads you to a way of viewing them without the author saying anything more than he always shouted. That says something to you, Or if, like, let's say that the author says something about whenever he spoke, he always had his eyes down, looking at the ground. What does that mean? If the author doesn't say, you have to make that leap. It means he's shy, or it means he has low self-esteem. If you can support it, it works. Because just because someone's shy doesn't mean they have low self-esteem. So look for the words there that can explain it. For example, again, in that crossing passage that I've shared with you many times, I take it as Cormac McCarthy is saying that all life on Earth, no matter whether it's a human being, an animal, like this wolf or whatever, is to be seen as something sacred. All life, sacred. Now, that's how I take the passage. Someone else might take that passage and say, it's not about the sacredness of life, but about how when there's death around us, we lose focus of what's important, which makes sense to me because in that passage, the young man is all by himself in the middle of nowhere with yapping animals all around, and yet his focus is entirely on this dead wolf. He has placed himself in danger, but isn't thinking about it. It's all about the dead wolf, So a lesson on death makes us lose our caution. So think about that. Think about how for the entire year I've told you to go with the concept, go with the idea of everything matters. And what I've always meant by that is, even though you, in your everyday life, probably don't dress symbolically, probably don't do a lot of things symbolically, in an AP passage, where we're only going to get a page of, say, some 300-page book, they've obviously chosen something where they think, the College Board does, something or some things symbolic are happening. And so you need to stay aware of that. So if in that Cormac McCarthy passage, I saw 3 different images that were religious in nature, then I take that and say, the death of a wolf seems to have some sort of religious significance for McCarthy. Or if I see that the word blood is used 4 times, the word stiff, or the word cradled, those things plant an image in my mind and lead me to my interpretation. Now maybe, I see the word cradled and I think different things than you, but that's okay as long as I can prove through my writing why I think cradled is important. So if the passage tomorrow asks you to characterize the people in the passage, look for those subtle things, those little nuances of life. Are they shouting? Are they whispering? What are they doing that says something about them? I don't know if you'll remember this from The Great Gatsby, but there's this line about Daisy Fay where it says, it says she always spoke a bit softly. All right. But by speaking softly, this had people get closer to her, to give her a feeling of maybe love and intimacy that didn't exist, that might otherwise not have existed. Remember that. Remember that Bruce Springsteen video that I showed you, Brilliant Disguise? Yeah. The only thing that happened in that video was we got closer and closer and closer and closer to Bruce, till it was uncomfortably close. Remember that? We were getting into his personal bubble, and by getting into his personal bubble, we had to deal with the terrible emotions, the terrible grief, the terrible doubt that he was going through. If we stayed far away, we didn't have to, but close up, I won't do it again, don't worry. We had to, So, what does the people do? That's what I mean by just noticing the little nuances of life. Someone uses their hands when they talk, or they don't. They've got their arms crossed. What do these things say? They brush their hair. I don't know. I don't know what the passage is going to be. Obviously, it's going to be a bunch of different passages from what I understand. But look for those little things that indicate something. For example, the married man who takes off his ring when he goes out at night. That says something. May not to some people, it may be totally innocent, right? But it may be something sinister. Just like in the video Brilliant Disguise. Remember? Bruce would get a call, but if he was the one that answered, the line would click. Cause of suspicion. Okay, I think I'm rambling now, so I better stop. But just remember, nuance. And then, as long as you can support it in a way that makes sense, you'll be fine. All right? There we go. Good luck.